love of the links. We've been away once again for a couple weeks. I promise you, for when we show the replay of this, that Bob is on the line. He's in a dark car driving to the airport. Is that where you're heading?
Heading to an airport and then heading to the other side of the state.
Yeah.
But
So
I did not want to miss this podcast.
No, he'll be with us, but you may not be able to see him, but you can hear him. I just saw a little bit of you, Bob, so you might be able to see him, folks, from time to time with the street lights. We are going to have some guests this week.
I was going to say, if you're of a certain age, I remember there was I don't know this I heard about this in school, but there was a radio show called The Shadow.
Yeah, I remember hearing that. Yep.
Yeah, the Shadow knows, so I could be like Golf Shadow tonight.
Bob the Shadow knows. Let's see what you do know, Bob. We have we're going to talk about PGA Tour, which we both admitted before we started recording we didn't watch much of the tournament this week. But we do have guests lined up for this week and for the next two following weeks. This week we're going to have two doctors. Well, one's a TPI certified fitness instructor, Scott Shepard. He does a lot of work with Mike Bender. He's part of Mike Bender's team. And then Dr. Ben Kersenbrock, who kind of is a mix of a chiropractor, but uses a lot of non-traditional medicine too. He likes his big claim, and he's a younger guy. He just turned 40 this past weekend. We take my daughter to him with her dance and making sure that she's in top physical performance for her dance and everything. So he's non-medicine. He doesn't like to use medicine, so he uses acupuncture and massage, and it's kind of a unique combination of the stuff he does. So we're going to talk to those guys this week about golf fitness and wellness. Next week we've got a good friend, Dr. Bob Winters. I'm sure you know Dr. Bob. Bob, he's done quite a bit of his work with David Ledbetter, working alongside David Ledbetter, and he's a mental guru. So we're going to touch on fitness and health this week and the mental game next week. And then the following week, we're going to have a gentleman from Golf Tech, Nick Clearwater, the vice president of instruction at Golf Tech. And we're going to kind of focus on modern instruction. Back in the day, and I'm sure Bob being a second generation PGA professional, you can see how much instruction's involved, from pros not having any help other than their eye to see and try to fix. And now it's just really all technology based.
Yeah, we've come a long way, haven't we?
Yeah, we really have. And for a while, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago, I used to go on a lot of these forums on Facebook, these group forums about instruction and stuff. And I love technology. I use technology a lot with my juniors that I teach. But there is definitely something to be said if you can have an eye, but I don't know how many people are not using the technology nowadays, Well,
that's going to be a great conversation. I remember when I got a Pentax K1000, I think, and I took photos of my dad and other members during their golf swing. And then 3 days later, after the film was developed, we went, oh, yeah, last Saturday, look at your position at the top. Boy, that looks really good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds sort of comical what we did back then. But I was telling some guys about this, and actually, I forget who I was talking to the other day about this, but I grew up imitating, and I just imitated my dad and the other PGA pros that came to his Hillview Country Club, and I'd watch them do a swing. I watched them hit long bunker shots, buried shots, knockdowns, you name it, and I just imitated. So I like kids in my youth program to do a lot of imitation, and things have come a long way, which is good.
Yeah, and what you said too, even for me being a little bit younger than you, but still in my mid 40s, I distinctly remember that all of my formal instruction when I was a youngster was by watching my dad too, or a book that I loved was Gabe Brewer. Had a lot of really good pencil drawings in it. You got Ben Hogan's 5 Fundamentals, Jack Nicklaus Golf My Way. So I was a big into not necessarily reading the books because I'm not a big fan of reading. I love audiobooks now, but just looking at the illustrations, or like you said, mimicking what you see from your father, from good players.
Yeah, those are good old days.
So speaking of good players, just a quick recap of Pebble Beach this last week. And again, admittedly, we didn't watch very much of it, either one of us. But, going into Sunday, Phil was right there. And I tell you, it's that old saying, horses for courses. Phil just always seems to find his way up near the top of the leaderboard at Pebble Beach. And unfortunately, he didn't get it done. He had a final round 74, but from what I heard, and again, because I didn't see much, and I'm looking at the final leaderboard right now, a little gusty on Sunday.
It was definitely windy. He made some amazing up and downs. I did watch more of the tournament on Sunday, and I were chatting. I was struck by, it was interesting to me, Steve Young, NFL quarterback, 49ers, Hall of Famer, won, I think, a couple of Super Bowls. He's in the last group with Mickelson. And I thought, I wonder what his mindset's like. I mean, he's a competitor. He's been at the top of his field. And Larry Fitzgerald with Kevin Streelman wins the Pro-Am championship. A couple of football guys, mighty competitors. So I thought, that's interesting in a solo sport like golf. They're in a sport you need offense and defense. And strikes me, it would have been neat to see what Steve Young was thinking about through that round.
Yeah, and we should bring that up next week when Dr. Bob jumps on, and maybe there's some parallels there with athletes from other sports and the mental game and how that seeps into their golf, because you do see that a lot of these professional athletes from baseball and football, as they come into retirement and start playing maybe in some of the celebrity tours, they got game, and they can really bring it. And that could be some good questions to talk to Dr. Bob next week.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I played with a lot of NHL players over the years, Hall of Famers, you name it, and guys like John Rattel was a smooth, classy player, and he plays golf like that. And other guys like a Terry Riley or Johnny McKenzie and different grinders and a little crazy on the ice, they kind of play golf like that. So I think something translates to the sport to sport.
Yeah, definitely. So Nick Taylor was the winner this past week at Pebble Beach. He had a final round 70 in those gusty conditions and took it pretty easily, won it by 4 shots over Kevin Streelman and 5 shots from Phil Mickelson. So I see one of our first guests, Scott Shepard. He's jumped on, so we're just going to wait a little bit before we introduce Scott. We got Ben Kersenbrock coming in again, and we'll do a little preface here before we talk to these guys. So Bob, we've talked about on several of the previous podcasts about the fitness craze. I remember when we had Rex Hoggard on, he had talked about doing a book with Joey D, which I didn't know. I had no idea that he was into that part of the game. But I thought by bringing these guys on, since it's something that you and I, Bob, have talked about, in drabs here and there during the last couple episodes, that maybe we should get some experts on here and talk about this, because it's something that started long before Tiger. I know a lot of people may give him the credit for this, but you think back and it was, guys like Gary Player. I know you brought Gary Player's name up a couple times, and it's always been there, but now it's definitely more prevalent.
Yeah, I've enjoyed learning more over the years. I remember thinking back to early PGA of America teaching coaching summits and the content and how that's changed, education's changed. And, somebody said this to me some years ago, your body is your 15th club. As you know, rules of golf, 14 clubs in the bag, but your body's your 15th club. So how can you do simple things like hydration? How can you do simple things like eating at the right time, before, during, having a snack during your round of golf? The fitness experts that'll join us will know it to the nth degree, but even staying hydrated, I think something like can help 10 to 20% of your swing. So if you're getting to the 16th hole and you have 150 yards and you normally hit X club and it comes up short, it might simply be due to not just being a bit dehydrated and not having the right energy. So that whole new, my wife is in the health and wellness industry, so I learned a lot from her. And there's a lot that we can all learn to make us better, more than just the X's and O's of the swing.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up some of the components that really don't have anything to do with the physical movement of the body, but some of the other things that do get overlooked, the hydration and staying, eating throughout the course of the round, keeping your energy levels up, and proper stretching, and even from the mental side. We're going to have Bob Winters again on next week, but that even creeps into this too, on this more of a holistic approach to becoming a better athlete, becoming a better golfer. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm sure Scott and Ben will touch on that a little bit. One thing I am going to ask these guys once Ben jumps on here too is some of the things that we've seen, and we've talked about this too, Bob, about some of the injuries we've seen from some of the best players in the world, and if there's any correlation between that and maybe going at it a little too hard with weights. Obviously, in some of the criticism that Tiger's had in the past about some of the injuries he have, whether you believe some of the stories or not, but some of that's equated to him kind of maybe going at it a little bit too hard. What was one of the stories Hank Haney had in his book about Tiger? Was he running with military boots on or something like that?
Mm.
So while we're waiting for Ben here, since Scott's on, we're gonna do our little Scott welcome. We'll do a little bio with you. Scott Shepard, as I mentioned at the start of the podcast, he does a lot of work here in Central Florida. Scott, you're a top 50 golf fitness instructor by Golf Digest. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's a pretty cool designation, especially when this niche in our industry has really become more and more prevalent over the last few years. So welcome. I guess we'll just start with just a little bit of your bio and background, how you got into the industry, what you're doing now.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Brendan. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
I'm a physical therapist. That's my background. And I was very interested in training athletes. So I got my license, and I got certified in strength and conditioning through a national board. And when I first came out, I was working with a company called Health South, which used to run the fitness trailers for the tour.
Yep.
And at the time, they were kind of looking for a local Orlando-based liaison, somebody that the players could see when they were injured. And I was really interested in golf. I hadn't grown up playing a lot of golf, but I was just interested in it more from the standpoint of knowing we're in Florida. This is a very good business opportunity just to work with golfers, because there's so many of them here. So I took the education and training, and at the time, that particular program didn't really grow very much. So I just started doing it on my own, marketed myself, and met some big names along the way who do a lot of work with Mike Benner Golf. And, that helped spur me along to get to work with a lot of different golfers. Worked with a couple of players on the LPGA Tour for a while, traveled around, spent some time there, really learned a lot about the professional golfer. And then really the last 10 years or more, I've been focusing on more of the amateur, the college level. I trained Rollins College women's team and Seminole State College women's teams here locally in Central Florida, as well as a lot of the top high school programs. I work with the Winter Park boys team and Lake Mary Prep, some of our top state high school teams, as you know. A lot of those kids train with us out of my studios.
Yeah, and I remember back, I did a TPI assessment with you.
Yeah.
And I remember it was during that old Health South, the push that the tour was doing with that. It's interesting you brought that up, because I was just looking at an article on TPI about, I think it was TPI, but it was about these fitness vans, these mobile fitness trailers that they have going with the guys, and maybe the timing was a little off back when you were becoming that liaison for that program, but it's interesting how it's exploded since then.
Yeah, it really has. All the golfers have really gotten into the athletic training side of it much more. So that's been, I think, a big factor with the just interest in it. And everybody right now is chasing distance and speed. So from the professional level, you get a lot of guys that are really chasing distance. I mean, all you got to do is go on Phil Mickelson's Twitter page and you can learn all about that. So
Yeah, definitely.
Dropping bombs.
Yep. Dr. Ben, welcome.
What's up?
We're just doing some bios, getting Scott's background. You guys know each other. You've worked a little bit together.
How's it going, Scott?
Yes. Hey, Dr. Ben.
So Ben, I know that you're not specific into golf, but what interested me with you is, and before I get your bio and stuff, I just wanted to preface it with this is, you've been working with my daughter who's a dancer, and it's your approach just seems a little bit different. And there's one of my students, actually, his mother's a massage therapist and a yoga instructor. And I was telling her about you and kind of your different approach as a chiropractor, but also using, using massage and using acupuncture and non-invasive approach to wellness. And I want to get into that with both of you guys. I know you both have a little bit different angle on this, on health and wellness. But Ben, why don't we start off with your background? And I know you do have a little bit of a sports background as a basketball player coming up. So why don't we start there?
Sure. Hey, before we start, Scott, you can hear me, right?
Yes, I can.
Dude, congratulations on the Golf Digest. Have you already seen this?
Yeah.
That's so awesome. I was just sitting here waiting to come on, and I'm like, oh, I should bone up on some golfing things. And it's like top 50 trainers in the country. That's incredible, man. Congratulations.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Happy to be on the podcast with you, dude. So Brendan, my background, that's what you want to start with?
Yeah.
Gosh, my background, I mean, I guess the most, did I lose you?
No, you're good.
Right on. So I graduated from Flagler with a degree in psychology, sort of had no idea about chiropractic, physical medicine, manual therapy, anything like that. First time I ever met someone who was doing manual therapy was a few years out of college, and it was someone who initially worked on animals of all things. And just as we talked about it, he put in my mind the idea that there is another way to heal beside chemicals, essentially, as the only healing agent, and guided me toward chiropractic. And looking back on it, it was so subtle, the little change he put into my mind, but made a lasting difference and pushed me this direction. So, my background, I came at this really late, which is why I feel like I am always looking up little things, like including in the Golf Digest, great workouts for golfers. And so I feel like I'm always sort of coming from behind with it. And so it sort of led me to have to, I suppose, push a little harder than some of the others. And that's my background.
Yeah, and it's again, I don't want to focus solely on golf, even though we're a golf podcast. But
sure,
it's a hot topic. It's been a hot topic for as far back as you probably can go with health and wellness. And we're not too far into the new year, and that's always everybody's New Year's resolution to get more healthy. I mean, hell, I went to my primary care doctor today to get a little checkup, and he's always nudging me to take better care of myself. But why do you guys both think, and Bob, you can chime in here too, with your wife having the background too with this, why do you think it's so difficult for people to really put an emphasis and put a focus on taking care of themselves? Because you only have one body and you're only here for so long. So I don't know who wants to start with this, but why do you think it's so difficult?
Go for it, Scott.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just think, if it's not broke, don't fix it. People generally kind of plug along and they feel like they're doing okay and start having problems, health problems or physical ailments, or just their, body composition just gets way out of order. Then they really start realizing, like, I have to do something about this. and I need to make a change. It's very difficult to make a change to, pretty much anything you're doing in life, whether it's trying to fix your golf swing or fix your nutrition. The things that you really need to do, those are the hardest things often to do. So I just think that's human nature, a lot of it. A lot of us know what to do, and it's not even a knowledge thing anymore, because knowledge is everywhere. It's just a matter of application. And, it's kind of like, even with me and practicing golf more and things like that, you get busy. I have 4 kids and family. I don't take a lot of time to work on my golf swing. I know what I need to be doing with my golf swing to make it better, but it becomes, it gets put on the shelf, for other things.
Yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell, man. People are difficult. We're animals before anything. That animal mind comes in and whispers all night long to you, even if your logical mind is telling you all the right things to do. And it's weird because the thing, I keep noticing with patients who are on the fence about commitment tend to want to be, I don't want to say wowed, but they want to see a quick result to prove to them that effort leads to results.
Yeah.
And that's where I think research is essential. When, if you go back just a few years, right, they would talk about, butt winking when you're squatting. And now the science on it is totally backwards. They used to talk about flexion was a terrible thing for your lumbar spine. I'm a chiropractor, so I'm always thinking about that stuff. And now lumbar flexion is part of just about every treatment plan. I think it makes it harder for people when, they're on the fence. Should I, shouldn't I? Sometimes they're told to do this. Other people tell them to do that. It's real easy, like Scott said, to just roll back over and turn Netflix on, then spend the effort. That's what I think.
Hey, Bob, doesn't that sound familiar when you get a student that wants to improve their golf game and that commitment thing comes up? And when you tell them, you can't just come and see me once or twice and expect things to change. You're going to have to put a little time into this, right?
Yeah, it's Dr. Bennett Scott. I am here on the shadow tonight as I travel across the Sunshine State at night. But you're right, and Brian and I have seen it in golf. People, maybe it's the microwave society mentality, but they want quick fixes, and the quick doesn't last too long. And I do for 30-something years. My lovely wife is in health and wellness, and she'll be the first to tell you that a lot of people have good intentions, but they think it's a quick fix, and after a week, they don't see a big change, and they go, it's not working. But I do want to mention, Dr. Ben, that one of my best friends in the world is a chiropractor, Dr. Brian Leahy from Everett Chiropractic outside of Boston, and he actually kept me in the game of golf. He would meet me at state opens and adjust me on his table in the parking lot. The guy's amazing, and so that goes back just a couple of years, but I've been a big fan of the chiropractic, and I had a couple of shoulder surgeries, and I've had acupuncture and massage therapy, so it all works together. It really makes a difference, and I applaud what you're doing to try help golfers, because sometimes they do rely too many on the chemical side.
Oh, I appreciate it, Bob. Do we have another connection? Your dad was born in the North End, I think, right?
Yes.
So is my mom. So,
oh my goodness! Wow.
Small world, right?
Yeah, wicked small.
Yeah, wicked small. That's right, man.
Scott, I wanted to jump into specifics with golf, and Ben, you could chime in here too. I don't know how many golfers you work with, but I know that's definitely Scott's sweet spot. What are the most typical injuries or areas that need the most focus with most of your golfers?
So I think it varies. So when you look at in an amateur golfer, which probably has a generally poor sequence of movement, poor swing, very inefficient, they tend to overuse a lot of the big muscles, and they tend to have a lot of muscular strain. So you see a lot of low back strain, you see a lot of mid back strain. Those two conditions are very treatable by chiropractic care. as well as, exercise and stretching. But a lot of that is, to me, the inefficiency patterns are overtaking. They don't have that effortless swing that we see in the pros, and they're putting so much energy and effort into it that they end up having muscular strains because they're trying to force a position, take a bigger swing, take a bigger turn that they can't handle. So a lot of that is what I see there. I think on the professional end, it just makes sense. It's more the overuse injury. They're just beating balls. I see a lot of wrist injuries. You can only take so many impacts. You'll see some wrist injuries. You'll see, even just, tendonitis type things, flare-ups that you'll get. And of course, disc injuries and the sort, just from years and years of being kind of laterally flexed over, rotating. The golf swing is not necessarily good for your body. It's just like a lot of sports, they're not good for your body. You do them, and if you're at a high efficiency level, you can stay in them. You can look at like a Tom Brady model of what he's done and staying in the game and staying very efficient in the way he's trained his body to be able to do that. But then you look at the flip side of it, and some of the guys who've had a lot of injuries, I think, who are, like you said before, they maybe are, they're pushing it in the gym. We're seeing a change in golf. We might see shorter careers, but there's so much money on the line, maybe it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So.
Well, one of the things that just came to mind is that longevity factor. You're talking about Tom Brady. What do those guys, Bob had brought up at a previous podcast, Bernard Longer, and he's seemingly had no injuries throughout the course of his career. What do you think that comes from for those type of athletes that just seem to be timeless?
Well, Dr. Ben can talk about this as well too, but I think a lot of the athletes have built a team around them. I know Tom Brady's got a physical therapist that, travels with him, and they commit to daily stuff, daily health. Look at Greg Norman, the way the guy exercises. Look at Gary Player. My example always, because I know you go to the Masters every year, right, Brendan? I see your stuff there. But
Yeah.
when we had the three greats teeing off, there was a pretty big differentiation you could see between one of those guys, and it was Gary Player.
Yes.
Gary Player has an actual golf swing that just looks great. And he's just as old as the other guys, but his swing just looks phenomenal. The other two guys, it looks painful at all.
Yeah.
So you got to say a commitment to health, nutrition, fitness is going to be a huge factor in longevity. And then a lot of these guys have built a team around where they bring in somebody like Dr. Ben, a chiropractor friend of mine is Dr. Troy Van Diesen, who's on the tour, works with, Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth. And these guys are getting regular treatment, regular care. They have access to things that the average golfer is just not doing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my background's basketball, and the what I always liken it to is the pictures of Michael Jordan when he was in year, 17 in the league, where he's puffy and looks a little bit hungover. And you relate that to guys who are in their 16, 17 year now, like LeBron. I mean, the big difference is LeBron has, like Scott said, a full nutritional regimen. They're doing acupuncture, they're doing hydrotherapy, cryotherapy, all these things that even just a single generation ago is not it, right? Like Jordan was out gambling, allegedly, till all hours of the morning. And I think guys are just taking it a lot more serious now and realizing incremental improvements are going to make a huge difference on the longevity. But the other side of that, though, is you have guys who don't seem to do anything to their body for the benefit, and they'll still last. There was an article in PubMed a few days ago, and they were talking about how runners, osteoarthritis in their knee is no more likely to be there, which doesn't really make sense, right? Because if you were pounding on the knee for years at a time, let's say you're a professional runner, you would expect to see more arthritis than someone who sat over in the AAA building all day, but it doesn't bear out. So it becomes a convoluted assumption to sometimes think, oh, well, if I just take care of myself, I'm gonna be okay, because, I think it leads you that it gives you the greatest likelihood. but boy, it's a lot of it seems to be like luck of the draw, unfortunately.
So nothing's given. I mean, you need to be aware of maybe what your genetics may play into it, or other factors. But the bottom line, and I was going to ask you guys here in a second what the non-professional millionaire athlete could do, but you do need to do something, whether it's preventative or if it is an injury, you need to take care of that injury through treatment. So that leads me to that question. Then we're referencing guys like LeBron, and I mean, I read something that he's the millions and millions of dollars he spends to stay healthy and to keep his career going for a long time. What does Joe average golfer or recreational 40-something basketball player at the Y, what do those guys do to make sure that, more importantly, they're around for their family for the long haul?
I think that, there's only a couple of major things, right? Like in Scott was talking about having his 4 kids in our house. We try to make sure that the kids are excited if we have what we call a rainbow plate, right? So we don't want to have golden brown nuggets, golden brown French fries, golden brown bun. We want a variety of color on the plate, so it leads to nutrition. That's something obviously that has to start super early in life. Otherwise, you get to the point you're an adult and trying to choke down stuff that you don't like becomes a bigger hassle and a stressor almost than it's worth. But nutrition plays the first part. Daily stretching in some form or another has to be part of it. I think one part that gets left out a lot is the mental aspect. Taking a minute to meditate is a huge part of like a balanced self. There are a couple of people that talk about your physical diet, but also I think your mental diet plays a big part into it. I think, I am guilty of it also, of waking up and immediately checking my phone to see what happened with sports or, news. But I think by giving ourselves a moment of mental meditation, some stretching and good nutrition, I think it's a really good start for people to avoid injury.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at it too, the other thing you want to think about is the big stuff, like trying to avoid risky behaviors and things like that. So from a golf standpoint, to me, it's, you got to go back to the instructor. If you're going to play a lot of golf but try to not get injured, you really need to have a swing that works for you. It works for your body. It works for where you're able to realistically move to. And I think that's one of the things a lot of amateur golfers really don't have any idea, how to achieve a swing that's going to be a long lasting swing for their body. It's more like go out, abuse my body, try to come back. It leads to a lot of injuries down the road, or with their training. And that's what we're seeing too, is you need to have a long-term plan for training. I always tell people fitness is for your life. So you don't have to be so obsessed with making such huge gains all at once. You really need to think about gradually getting better at it. Improving your weak areas should be your number one goal. Not just enhancing the areas that you're already strong. So, some of the ways you can protect yourself, I think, is getting good advice from a professional, whether it be a health professional, a golf swing instructor, or somebody like myself. When I sit down with people, I just try to tell them, look, this is your biggest problem area. This is the thing that's affecting you the most, and that's what you should be working on. So I think those are the ways that you try to keep yourself healthy, and you look for those big areas. And some people say, like even with nutrition, it's like an 80-20 rule, 80% of the time, whatever, eat good, 20% of the time, you can have some of that. Just if you can live that kind of a lifestyle with the other elements of your training, your activities, that's probably a good solution to not getting a whole lot of trouble injury wise, and to stay in the games for a long time.
Yeah. And enjoying it, I think that's like the huge part. Go for it. Sorry, Ben.
No, yeah, Dr. Brandon Scott, maybe we're going to have you come back another time, because I wanted to do a deeper dive into, my wife has been working with a lot of the plant-based food, nutrition, and some people it's still processed. If you go true plant-based, and the long-term athletic development models that are out there, I was working on one when I was with PGA of America. It's a really, there's a lot there that we'd love to help people dive into the deeper.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. I can talk all day.
Yeah, I agree, because I stumbled upon, I don't know if any of you guys have seen that documentary they did on Netflix about the plant-based diet. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger had a part in that, and it was interesting because it just seems like what we've been taught for so long may not necessarily be the case, and it makes you question everything when it comes to health and a lot of things. So yeah, Bob, I definitely agree. I'd like to have these guys back on to do some deeper dives with some other specific areas.
Specifically with that one, I'm more than happy to come. I think that's a great idea. It's funny because that one is it's almost like they exaggerated the point to drive the point home, but took it so far that like it ignores the blatantly obvious. But yeah, I mean, we talk about that definitely on another show.
And Scott, to that degree, so walk me through, let's say a junior golfer comes in to see you. Is it the TPI background you have? Is that kind of the first thing you do, or do you have more of a holistic type thing where you actually get into looking at their nutrition? How does something like that start?
So, I mean, my background from, fitness, performance, movement, is that I'll do some form of a movement screen. We'll do a base level strength screen and a base level speed power screen. So we want to know just like generally how athletic are they? That's the first thing. And it's really for them. I don't compare them to any, other models. I don't compare them to a PGA Tour player, things like that. I don't use that stuff. I just want to have a baseline screen on somebody. Like, for example, just basic stuff. Like, I mean, can you do a push-up? Can you do a pull-up? Like, what's your basic body control level? Just so I have an idea, because I think there's certain check boxes you need to have where it's like, if you want to be athletic and maximize your potential, you should be able to do certain basic things. So we look at that. We'll ask them questions about their nutrition. I'm not really a nutritionist per se, but I'll send them into certain directions. I can talk to them a little bit about what to eat on the course, things like that, general things. I have some guidelines that I'll give them, but I'm looking at movement because from my standpoint, my specialty is trying to help people achieve a more efficient golf swing. And by efficient, I mean like get in better positions, improve their sequence, improve their speed, power, which are going to help their distance. And I work really hand in hand with their coach. So I would be coming to you and saying, what are we seeing in the swing? What are the things you're looking at in the swing where you see leaks, energy leaks, power leaks, stability leaks? I'm going to look at my movement screen, match all that up and say, here's the big problems you really need to start working on immediately. So you kind of have a short-term goal and a long-term goal for every kid that comes in. And a lot of them for the short-term goal, it might be really basic things. And then for the long-term goal, it might be much more specific plans, trying to really help them fix problems in their golf swing with certain movements or drills that we do in the gym.
It's interesting to me with a lot of the juniors I work with, you can't really take it at first sight. I mean, you get a 13-year-old kid and they look like they're fit. They look like they can move well, but it's amazing some of the immobility that they have that you would never see at first sight. So for both of you guys, I mean, Ben, I know you probably see that maybe you get a dancer in there like my daughter that can do certain things, but maybe her flexibility isn't quite what people may see from just observations of them. So it is something where I think it should be a first step for every young athlete is to go in and get some kind of screening to see where their deficiencies might be.
And really, if you're going to say young athlete, I mean, what I try to explain to my patients, even the ones that are sitting over at AAA, is they're athletes too. You know what I mean? Just because they're not getting paid, just because they're not getting scholarship, it's just important for them to roll around the ground with a grandkid as it is for a world champion BJJ guy. So that's, I think, Scott, you and I probably don't you use some form of the FMS in your exam?
Yeah, I use a quick screen that includes some of the screens in the FMS. I don't use the actual FMS, but I just use some of the components because I think some of the basic movements they look at are just fundamental. So we use for that screen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so we do the same. I think that's part of our day 2 process is just understanding how they move. And I'm always surprised at people who look really fit who can't do cross crawl well or posterior to anterior roll. Getting those baselines, I think, is essential for obviously any kind of study and improvement of anything, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's just more for me for the health, from the health standpoint, because the thing about sports is you're going to have imbalances. And oftentimes I tell people that the imbalances that they have for the sport are generally good for the sport, but not necessarily good for the long-term health. So I think what you need to know is if you're way out of balance with anything. So general screening helps tell you if you're a little bit way out of balance with certain movements, you should be able to do these basic things. And the great thing is they're easy to train and you can fix them really easily. Much harder to fix the specific things than it is to fix the general things.
Yeah.
Bob, you happen to have a last question before I let these guys plug some of the stuff that they're doing?
Yeah, well, I just want to also mention to Scott that I think it was back in 1998 or 9, I had one of my first shoulder surgeries, and the team at Health South back then and near my club in Ocean City, Maryland, helped get me back feeling good. And then when I had my spring demo day, I had Health South come out, and so I've been advocating for the body and the health of the body and taking care of the body as far as, like I said before, the body's your 15th club in the bag. Yeah. And when you go to a demo day, everybody's trying to get the best club, but sometimes they forget about working on maybe simply, as I said before, hydration, simple stretching. I don't know how many times, Brennan, you and I played with people, or they get to about the 7th or 8th hole and they go, I finally feel like I'm ready to hit one, because they're so tight as a drum early on.
Yeah, I agree. Golf's one of those sports, that I don't know why, but for whatever reason, you just assume you can go out and be full speed. A sprinter would never think that. Tom Brady wouldn't go out and throw a 60-yard pass right off the bat, but everyone goes to the driving range and just pulls the driver out first thing, So it's just it's
so good.
It's getting better. It's probably not going to change that much over time because guys want to play golf. That's why my services are still and probably will always be considered a niche market.
It's too bad, though. It should be part of instruction in general. It should be the first step. I mean, I know, Bob, you probably do the same thing I do, but I do the first introductory lesson I do with someone, I have a questionnaire, and one of the first questions is all health. The first few questions are all health related. Do you have any injuries? Do you have any thing that I should know about? And a lot of the times they'll say no, and then you'll get into lesson 2 or lesson 3. They're like, oh, I had this in my knee. Right? And you just feel like you could be doing more damage than good as their golf instructor. So it should be part of what we do as golf instructors. Agreed, Bob?
Well, yeah, and I also had another question. Are you a New York sports fan? And then if they are, then my rate goes up.
Yes. Guys, one last thing before you plug. Each of you can plug what you're doing or your businesses. But what's one piece, the biggest piece of advice you could give somebody that's, is Scott, as you said it, that's on the fence about commitment, or Brandon, I can't remember who said that. So one piece of advice for those folks, and then plug what you guys got going.
Go for it, Scott.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is, I think if you have a plan and you write something out, a goal, you have to have a specific goal or reason why you're doing something, whatever that might be. So if you can write out a few goals that you have, and somebody might be like, well, I just want to play more pain-free. or, you know, I want to add 10 yards to my drive or whatever. If you have some specific goals, then you can go into an instructor, a fitness trainer, or whoever, and say, hey, I need to do this. I need to be able to improve this. But if you're just randomly throwing things around, you're never going to be super successful. You have to write it out, have a plan. You know, my big thing is for the juniors is, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing here? You know, what's the point of this session? So what's our end goal? Let's go work on those things. Did we improve? You know, you have to have a plan, and that's where getting screened or having some initial method helps you out, because you can look back later and say, wow, look at this. You know, I can only do 1 push-up when I came in, and now I can do 27 or whatever, you know. Ben?
The one thing I would have people take away from it, I think, would be a handful of minutes of yoga every day. I think that's the most important thing, more important than anything I do. If you can get people on the floor moving their bodies like they ought to, I think a large percentage of complaints go away. We were talking about how asymmetries, you know, they're good as long as they're within like a certain parameter. I think that's how you keep them within that zone of green without causing too many problems.
Yeah, and with the yoga too, there's the mental aspect that goes hand in hand with that, right?
You know, I mean, you can make it that way, right? I have some patients though that I probably recommend yoga to 9 out of 10 people, even tiny little dancers. Yep. And I'm surprised how many people tell me no because of religious reasons. You know, they put all this additional effort into it. Like, I just want the person on the floor stretching and moving. But yeah, I mean, you can add the mental into it if you want, but just a little bit of like getting your body doing what it's supposed to be doing every day. Besides, you know, when you go out to the range and pull out the driver, like a little prep goes a long way, I think.
Yeah. So guys, why don't you go ahead and plug websites or social media or podcasts? Ben, I think you had a podcast at one point.
Yeah, I'll probably tag this one if I could. My website for my business is kmw.care. It's Kersenbrock Medical and Wellness. I said in the beginning that I'm a chiropractor, but our office is now medical doctor overseeing rehabilitative exercises, acupuncture, yoga, massage, regenerative medicines. We got all kinds of ways to get people better without giving them pills, and that's the goal of myself and my whole team.
Yeah, and mine is I do a lot of stuff on Instagram and on Twitter, Facebook, things like that. But my Instagram is @driven, which is the name of my program, Driven Golf Fitness. It's @driven_SPT, or like sports performance training. So @driven_SPT. My website also is www.drivenspt.com, which right now is a landing page because we're redoing our web page right now. You can also find more information on me on mikebender.com, because I manage all the fitness for academies and Biographic. But if you want to see what we're doing in the gym, @driven_SPT is my handle for Instagram. You'll see a lot of the stuff, a lot of what we're doing, and how we train people to achieve what I call positional mobility, positional stability for golf.
Guys, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Like Bob said, we'll get you in here again, because there's definitely plenty of topic to speak on these in this area of health and wellness and fitness. So thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks a lot. See you, Scott. See you guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Matt.
you.
Yeah.
Bob, that was good, man. I tell you what, I'm excited with not only talking to those guys again at some point, but with Dr. Bob next week and some of the other guests we've got lined up.
Oh yeah, it's a great lineup.
I know you, with your wife being in this industry, this is an important thing for you too.
Yeah, I don't know. She can add a lot to this conversation if you're okay with having her.
Yeah, that'd be great to have her on there.
Yeah,
so,
she's been doing this a long time.
And again, for the listeners, I don't think this is a topic that you should just, listen to casually or maybe glance at an article that you see online. This is important. And I know for me, after having my trip to the doctor today, I really need to take this seriously myself. So that was our Love of the Links episode for the week of February 10th. We'll be back next week with Dr. Bob Winters talking about the mental aspects of the game. Bob, safe travels, my friend. We'll see you next week.
We'll see you soon. Thanks, Brendan.
Yep. Thanks everybody for listening.